I will call this City Council and Local Contract Review Board meeting to order. Deputy City Recorder Raimundo, please call roll.
Council President Hu?
Here.
Mayor Lube?
Here.
Youth Councilor Nog? Here. Councilor Shaw?
Here.
Councilor Singh?
Here.
And Councilor Wolf?
Here.
Thank you, everybody. If you're online, please mute your mics and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. City teammates or counselors, are there any non-agenda items to add tonight?
None from us, Mayor.
Okay, thank you so much. We will move on to public comment. If you would like to comment now, please call to get in the queue. The call-in number is 503-966-4101. And if you are in person, we have a public comment sign-up sheet at the front of the room. And we are going to go ahead and follow up with previous public comment with Assistant City Manager Nyland.
Good evening, Mayor Lube and Council. We did have one person provide comment at our last council meeting on March 21st. It was in person, and that was a resident named Lisa. She was a contestant in a pageant for Mrs. Washington County and was practicing public speaking. And I believe, Mayor Lube, you've been in contact with her, getting more information about the pageant and her platform and whatnot. So that is my update. And suddenly I feel like waving. So that was my report this evening, and we will keep you updated on how that pageant goes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We did receive 3 written public comments today. Heather Vanderbilt had some concerns about residential parking zone around Tigard High School, requesting that it be removed. Kelly Hernandez has concerns regarding the vandalism and graffiti around Macy's store and Washington Square in general. And Robert Hurd contacted us regarding the tenant and landlord sort of rules that we're looking at later on today. And so I trust city teammates will get back to each of those individuals with their different requests. Perfect, thank you. Mr. Raimundo, has anyone signed up to speak in person tonight?
Just one moment, Mayor.
Sure. I'm gonna guess no, since the audience is city teammates. Perfect, thank you so much. Network Administrator Cleary, are there any phone callers in the queue or any requests to comment by video?
We have no callers and no requests to do video testimony.
Okay, thank you so much. We will move on to the consent agenda. And the consent agenda is used for routine items, including minutes and approval of contracts or intergovernmental agreements. Information on each item is available on the city's website in the packet for this meeting. Items may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Council members may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Today on the consent agenda is the Ash Drive pavement repair contract, an amendment to contract for construction oversight on Reservoir 18 pump station, and Cook Park inclusive play structure site prep purchase order. There has already been a request to pull the Cook Park inclusive play structure site prep purchase order. That's fun to say. And so we will consider the consent agenda, both items A and B for now. Are there any questions or a motion?
I move to approve consent agenda as modified.
I second the motion.
Thank you. The motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to discuss the Cook Park inclusive play structure. And I believe we have Mr. Grun here to give us a brief overview.
Thank you, Mayor Lube. Thank you, councilors. Rick Ruin, Parks and Rec Manager. It's good to be here in front of you. And I know that a number of you, certainly we enjoyed having you all on tour this weekend, and hope you had a lot of good experiences while we're out there. And subsequently, it raised some questions for some council members, and we're happy to answer those. And I believe we satisfied Councilor Wolf's questions, and Councilor Hu, I can address some of your questions tonight if you like, unless you have any specific questions ahead of that.
Oh, thank you so much. I have I just received the reply just momentarily. So if you could, I mainly just for those audience watching, this contract is for the site preparation, which is including the demolition and preparation. The cost for the other section, which including the installation and material for the playset, they have already been approved. So
Correct.
We're only talking about the contract for site preparation. So the reason I have some questions because my understanding that the initial bid coming back surprised the city engineer or the engineer department because it was expected half as much. So now it's more than double of that. My understanding is that. So I just want to understand a little bit about the bid process.
Okay.
And if you could just educate us, the public and the newbie like me, how this was bid out and why it was decided on this contract price, even though it was more than twice as the originally expected price. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, very good. So big picture-wise, we started out with a delivery method. Ultimately, it was a design. We decided to have a design competition. I guess I'll start there. We have many of our major manufacturers have representatives in the area, and one of the delivery methods that we can consider, other than a typical or traditional request for bid or request for proposal, is to use an alternate method. In this case, it was we have options to use a national purchasing agreement or a state purchasing agreement, which would allow us to using that process. We could do a direct procurement. The manufacturers, suppliers already go through a vetting or bidding process to get on a state or national list. What it does for us is it gives us greater flexibility. However, knowing that we have many of the manufacturing reps in the area and we use them all, we decided to have a little bit more fun with this and entered into a design competition. So we were kind of creating a hybrid approach to delivery. While we could have directly procured with one, we thought in the interest of fairness to all of our reps that do work with us around the city to open it up and create a vision. We had open house and got a lot of great feedback. This was going to be our first truly inclusive playground in the community. So with that said, the purchasing agreement that we used gave us some greater flexibility, which really came into play later on. So we went through the design competition, selected the winning proposer, went through value engineering, and they were delivering a purchase price for equipment and installation. While we were finishing up some site work, we would come back later on to look for a site improvement contract as we went through the land use and permitting process. So fast forward, when we entered into the agreement with our manufacturing rep, we were just coming through the end of the pandemic, in the pandemic, supply chain issues, as you're well aware of. When we awarded, we had locked in a certain date with the installing contractor. We ended up being about 6 or 8 months out for delivery of the playground equipment, which ultimately meant we lost the schedule with our install contractor. So subsequently, Councilor, when we were finally ready to look at the purchase agreement for the site work, We are now dealing with rising costs from the original bid estimate for the site prep. This includes, as we're going through land use and we're in a floodplain, and our project team is also on the call tonight. Carla Stetter, our project manager, and Joe Wisniewski, our city engineer, is with us. So we had to go through land use and environmental permitting, and which again created more time. So we're dealing with land use and permitting timelines, the schedule with the install contractor. And so we went to the install contractor and asked them if they would like to bid on the site work. They did bid. So again, this was earthwork, excavating, grading. We expanded the footprint of the play structure to be able to accommodate more elements of both inclusive play and traditional. And we heard from the public, more swings, more swings. So we pushed out a node to add more swings and take advantage of the berm that would allow a greater experience for those with physical limitations to enjoy the playground. That said, all of that contributed to the rise in cost in terms of scope of work, the time of the estimate relative to going out to bid, 30–40% increases in cost. Overall, everything, as you're aware, was costing so much for public contracts. So when we got the bid, yes, there was some sticker shock. So we actually, knowing we had time still waiting on the delivery of the playground equipment, we held back. We looked at our scope, make sure our scope was tight. Were we missing anything? Subsequently, we did find another contractor who was, we also have to be careful about the type of contractor dealing with playground equipment, knowing what the outcome and project looks like. Because there are a number of safety requirements. So trying to move this along, we did go out for a second bid with a local contractor who works closely with the installing contractor. And while it came in less, it was still, twice what the engineer's estimate is. So the project team got together. We looked at timing. We looked at, just the market conditions, the availability of contractors, best value. Knowing now we're sitting in our public works yard with $500,000 worth of playground equipment, we figured we just needed to recognize that this was just going to be a higher than estimated cost for the delivery of the project on the site prep work being twice what the estimate was. So talking with the project team and knowing we needed to get going on it, we didn't think the process we used, the public contract, didn't contribute to any of the higher costs. It just allowed us to expand the scope of the original contract awarded to be able to fit the second bid we received and ultimately accepted into that original primary contract, as opposed to having to go out for an RFP. So just based on the availability of contractors, the experience of the contractors, the cost of everything skyrocketing, and the second bid validating the first bid, which is why the project team and myself ultimately accepted that bid.
Oh, thank you. I surely understand you want to maintain the quality and not just allowing anybody to bid on it. So my underlying question is, how confident are you from scale 1 to 100%? Is 100% confident that how you went out for a third bid, the price will be substantially lower? Or is that even was that even a possibility?
Well, I would say from our experience, using the Shoals Ferry Crossings project as an example, we didn't have much luck getting bidders on that project. So we knew the scarcity of qualified contractors was out there. We knew that we needed, we were looking at best value in terms of the contractor to be able to perform the work that was needed on, again, a safety related project. So I would say, using my science background, 95% confidence level.
All right.
I'm reasonably certain that a third bid would result in a similar number.
Thank you. And yeah, I just want to make sure because during the tour you were mentioning that the city has not really kept up with maintenance budget. So I'm just a little concerned, because my understanding is that this project will take away some of the maintenance fund from the park. Or was that?
Well, what we were able to do was allocate some of the 22 fiscal year project maintenance dollars that we didn't expend. I'd like to think we're very efficient as, with our parks maintenance team do great work. So what we had some carryover money that our finance folks were able to carry forward into the next fiscal year and allocate that, transfer those dollars, our park major maintenance dollars, which is still in SDC, over to the CIP for this work. So it wasn't shortchanging our ability to maintain our parks. We weren't robbing, to offset that. We just had some carryover money.
Thank you so much. That's all I have, Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions regarding the Cook Park structure? Other than I'm really excited. And I think our community is. They're looking forward to swings as well.
We're very excited.
Yeah. Councilor Shaw?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. More of a comment. I just want to applaud Manager Gruen and his team for really coming up with the innovative idea to have a competition and to open it up. I think that's creative, innovative, and also making sure that they are fiscally responsible with the budgets, but also ensuring that safety was first and foremost of concerns, and then the additional swings, because I know I've heard from a number of different constituents that swings is very important when their kids go to play. So just wanted to highlight that and say thank you very much to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shaw.
Yeah, I will also add, I think it was a great way to involve the community on what they wanted to see in Cook Park, which really is such a jewel to our community. So it was a great way, in a lot of different forums, people were talking about which one they liked and why they liked it. So yeah, it was a great way to get the community involved.
Thank you, Mayor Liu.
If there are no questions, I would entertain a motion to approve
All right. Sorry, Mayor Liu and all. I move to approve the Local Contract Review Board award a purchase order to Ross Recreation Equipment for the inclusive play structure at Cook Park in the amount of $338,944 and direct the city manager to take steps necessary to finalize purchase.
Well done.
Second the motion.
Is there a second?
I'd second the motion.
Perfect. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate it. And we'll go get it done.
And let us know. I mean, we'll be excited to cut that ribbon and play all over the swings. Yep. Next on our list, we have a resolution of necessity related to the easement acquisition for the Red Rock Creek Stabilization Project. Y'all aren't going easy on me making, anything today. Principal Engineer Newberry. Thank you for being here.
Yes, good evening.
Real quick, can you turn on the mic real quick? Sorry. Thank you.
Sorry. All right, we're good now. The Red Rock Creek project is located in the Tiger Triangle. The section of stream that we're looking at right now is from 72nd to just downstream of Dartmouth. This section of stream has been identified as a high priority in our adopted 2018 stormwater system plan. It's a high priority just due to the erosion that's occurring. So just downstream of 72nd, we have a sanitary sewer line that's been exposed from the erosion. We've had some line breaks that have occurred, and this is on the Regal Tiger property. Just downstream of there, we have, again, on the Regal Tiger property, there's a lot of incision going on, a lot of sediment getting eroded, and that sediment is getting deposited down near Dartmouth. This is where the stream flattens out. So with all the sediment filling in this area, now we get localized flooding on the roadway of Dartmouth. So there's a couple times a year where our public works crews have to close down multiple lanes just due to high water. So we have hired a design consultant, OTAC, to come up with some plans and a design to stabilize this creek in this section so we can reduce this erosion and flooding. During this current design process, the consultant has identified easements that we need to construct the project and to maintain the project once the project is complete. So I had the consultants put together some maps for you. We got the first one up here that kind of shows the location of these easements, and I'll kind of discuss those more now. So on this exhibit that's shown now, we have Dartmouth to the right. Again, that's where we're having these flooding issues. On the top, you can see a portion of Costco. On the bottom, that's Walmart. And that green hatched area, that's where we're looking for a permanent greenway easement. This allows the construction of the project and to maintain that vegetation in this area. As you can see on this map, that easement is located within existing wetland or vegetated corridor areas, so there's no impact to the existing development. If they can go to the next slide. Okay, so on the left, again, that's Dartmouth, kind of in the lower area, that's Winco. Across the stream that's where the AutoZone property is. Again, we're looking for a permanent greenway easement in this area. And again, it's within existing wetland or vegetated corridor areas, so there's no impacts to the existing development. To the right, we have Southwest 72nd. There's a Stewart property. That's where McDonald's is located. That easement, the greenway easement that we're pursuing is again outside existing development and kind of within vegetated corridor areas. Now, where we do have impacts to existing development is at the Pacific Realty site. This is also Pac Trust, and this is where Regal Tigard is located, which you may have heard that just recently closed just a couple weeks ago. The easements that we were looking for is on Southwest 74th, a permanent access easement that will allow access during construction and access after construction. In the yellow there is a utility easement for a new culvert crossing. In the orange there is a temporary construction easement that the contractor can use to access the project and potentially store material or equipment during construction. And again, we have that greenway easement. A lot of the greenway easement that is to the left of 74th or west is due to the removal of an existing culvert. So there's an existing culvert that spans that parking lot. What we would like to do is remove that culvert and open up that to provide a natural resource and a healthy stream in that area. I also want to note in that greenway easement, we're including language that will include a possible new public trail. This is something that is in pre-design efforts with our community development department, and I'll show that here in a second. So yeah, this is, if we can go to the next slide, I'll show you that trail. So these are some renderings that our consultant team put together. This is a perspective that's looking to the northeast. You can see in the upper right is Regal Tigard. And this shows what the stream improvements are going to look like, or what we want, what the goal is for that to look like, and this is based on our current design. So you can see that preliminary trail design. Again, this is not part of the project, but it's something our community development department is looking at. So this shows a healthy stream corridor. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is a different perspective. This is basically looking from 72nd, looking to the southwest. Again, a healthy stream corridor with a preliminary trail alignment shown there. And you can see the Regal Tigard on the upper left there. I do want to note that each of these property owners has been contacted about this project. We had to obtain right of entries from them to complete the surveying, wetland, and other environmental studies. We also had a design workshop of May of last year with a representative from Stewart Properties and Pac Trust. This is a way for us to explain the project, note the impacts to their properties, and we kind of looked at some redevelopment scenarios with Pac Trust. Since then, we've had 2 follow-up meetings with Pac Trust, the most recent one being in December. Again, showing the impacts to our site, the improvements that we're doing, and looking at redevelopment options once they do redevelop. And we've had input from our community development department in those meetings also. So with, Regal Tiger being closed, those redevelopment plans might be coming sooner than later. So this resolution of necessity allows the city to obtain these easements through eminent domain, but I would consider that as a very last option. Shortly after this meeting, we'll have, or if this resolution gets passed, we will have our consultant team get appraisals on those properties, and the information from those appraisals will be used to begin negotiations with those property owners. So what we expect and what our goal is to obtain the easements through those negotiations. One last thing I would like to note is construction is scheduled to start late next spring, 2024, with construction expected to end fall of 2025. So with that, I just want to say thank you for your time, and I'm here for any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's really cool to see the potential future trail in there. You must have heard this council likes maps and pictures.
Yes, I did hear that. I listened to a council meeting last month, and I was like, we need to prep.
Helps us visualize. It really does, because you see it every day, and you know exactly what you were talking about, so it really helps us. Are there any questions? I know there was a robust set of questions previously. Councilor Wolf?
Yeah, I'll just thank you, Engineer Newberry, for responding. My question or comment was in regards to, is there an appropriate budget for some of these right-of-ways? And so I appreciate your response and just really what's already in place with the greenways. So I'm good to go. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Seeing no additional questions, is there a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 23-06.
I second the motion.
Thank you. The motion has been moved and seconded. Will the Deputy City Recorder please read the number and title of the resolution?
Resolution number 23-06, a resolution declaring the need to acquire property for the Red Rock Creek Stabilization Project and authorizing eminent domain and immediate possession if necessary.
Thank you so much. Youth Councilor Nog for an advisory vote?
Yes.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Seeing none, resolution 23-06 is adopted by unanimous vote of the council. Thank you so much for being here.
Mayor Lube, I didn't see or hear Councilor Shaw's vote. Can we repeat that one more time, Councilor Shaw?
Yes, I was a yes.
Thank you.
Jesse.
I apologize. I thought I heard it. You can also raise your hand if you want, so we get the visual.
I thought my voice was strong enough, but I may do that. Thank you, Mayor.
Next on the agenda today, we have a board and committee eligibility policy, and Senior Management Analyst Hendricks is here to present. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's good to see you. My name is Nicole Hendricks, and I'm the Senior Management Analyst in the City Manager's Office here at Tigard. And yes, tonight we are here to bring forward a policy for your consideration that outlines eligibility requirements for volunteers who serve on our boards and committees. And then can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So we're asking you to have reviewed the attached policy in the council packet and then discuss tonight and provide any suggested changes to that policy and also consider adoptions with or without any edits. And then next slide, please. Thank you. So over the last couple years, we have been continuously improving some of the just different components and experiences for our board and committees that have ranged from application process updates to kind of experience surveys for interviews and things like that. So the policy proposed tonight just continues on with those kinds of improvements with the goal of advancing values with our community promise and our strategic plan, and mainly just focusing on the values of equitable and accessible. So for the policy, there are a few different components, the first being around member eligibility. So what we're proposing is that board members may not be employees of the City of Tigard, members of an elected official's household, or a close relative. And the eligibility also points back to our code of conduct for board and committee volunteers. So that basically is a framework for how board members interact with each other and the public and things like that. So it's a good thing to point out that we want people to sign that before they commit to that volunteer role. The next piece of the policy is about serving on multiple boards. So what we're proposing is that we don't allow a board member to serve on more than one standing board at the same time. So this just allows for new voices and just better access for more people to join our standing committees. So that's things like Committee for Community Engagement. And then we also have a section in the policy about exceptions, and it specifically kind of focuses on this idea of a non-standing board, which essentially means a board that has a pre-established date or a noted limited duration to resolve the board. So examples of a non-standing board could be a technical advisory committee for a special project, or things like the Public Safety Advisory Board or Charter Review Committee. And so mainly we have the one exception basically is that a member of a standing board may also serve on a non-standing board at the same time, and this is because the knowledge and kind of experience of a standing board member can provide unique value to a non-standing board. So we do state in the policy that where possible, we do want to still give preference to new voices and diverse perspectives. So there is that one exception kind of called out in the policy. So so overall, again, the policy just kind of sets some clear expectations and standards around how we're navigating eligibility and participating on multiple boards and things like that. Helps us just give access to new voices and advances our city initiatives and values, like I said earlier. Next slide, please. So again, our ask is just for kind of a discussion of the policy. If you have any edits, share those, and then consider adoption as well, with or without any edits. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And I will just say I appreciate how much our boards and committees has evolved since I have been on council. And it's great to see that there are clear expectations and things that we can point to and rules being presented. And code of conduct, I think that's really important. You know, the same way that we all agree to work together, it's important that everybody has a baseline understanding of what's expected of them on a board. So I appreciate that. Are there any questions or comments regarding this policy? Suggestions, changes? Oh. Yeah, Councilor Wolf.
Thank you so much. It's really just a comment. I'm assuming then when someone applies, Nicole, this will all be in the packet, the policy, code of conduct, so everyone sees all of it in advance. And that, I mean, so I thought it was great. I have no edits.
Thanks.
Just to make sure that it's offered up and posted. So.
Yeah, we'll be sure to have it on the website and in the packets when we print them as well and put them on the bulletin boards and things like that.
As a side note, I think it may actually be a great idea when we go through and get new members that the old members also have the expectation of signing it. So everybody goes into maybe the next session of January, all having the same expectations.
Thanks.
Council President Hu?
Just following up on Mayor Loop's comment, I think it would be also helpful if to have a short tutorial, like verbal tutorial of, you know, what our expectation, because I know as a new board member 7 years ago, it's kind of overwhelming. So it will be helpful to say, hey, this is an example of why you know when you should say this and when you should not say that. So that would be helpful. And I think my email to you already suggests exceptions in there also include, you know, employees can be in the non-standing committee. So yeah, so all right,
yeah, we'll include that. I saw that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Shaw.
Thank you. Yeah, my question was also about the employees for non-standing, just because I know we have a couple who are on them. Yeah. So thank you, Council President Hu. Also, with regards to, I know sometimes Senior Manager Analyst Hendricks, we have some not a robust applicant pool for some of our standing boards and committees. And given that, is there exceptions for someone who may want to be on two and we find they're determined that their expertise and their time allows for that? So that'd be the first question. And then the second is, in that packet of instruction, will it be explained what diverse perspectives means? Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say to the first question, I mean, this policy is at all council's discretion. So whatever exceptions you want listed, we can incorporate those. And can you repeat the second question? It was about just
just the definition of diverse perspectives.
Sure.
And who would be determining what diverse perspectives mean?
Yeah, so that's something that we can expand on in probably more around like our onboarding packets and things like that. And that's something that we can work on and we can bring back to council for input. Or yeah, we can provide options for that.
I don't necessarily want to slow the process down. So if it's in the packet, that's fine. It could be very open to interpretation. Does it mean geography? Does it mean political stances? So just if there's some guidance, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, I would just say for discussion's sake that the diverse perspectives, in my opinion, would include all of those different options.
Right.
You know, I think it could be different depending upon the board, what that diverse perspective could be. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate wanting the definition. I also appreciate the flexibility that it could be different depending upon the board, what we could be after. So I just want us to keep that in mind as well. Councillor Singh, any questions? No.
Thank you.
Yeah. Youth Councillor Nog.
Actually, I have a clarifying question.
Yep.
I like thought about this right now. So, if you're serving on a board and you have like a voting position on a board, you can't serve on something else, or.
Right, so in this policy, it would propose that like if it's a standing board that we like currently have, that there's not an established end date, then that would be correct. They couldn't serve on a different board unless it was a technical advisory committee or a charter review committee, something that's non-standing. So they could, it's a possibility, but it would have to be under certain circumstances.
So if somebody from the Tigard Youth Advisory Council were to like have a position on another like board, it would be non-voting then.
It would be, no, not necessarily. They could be voting, but it would only be on a non-standing board. Okay. So a TIAC member, Tigard Youth Advisory Council member, could serve on charter review committee. That's a possible option, and they could be voting. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you asking the question. I want to say historically, we weren't necessarily as well organized as we are now with boards, and interview processes didn't talk to each other. So there was a circumstance in which we had one community member, I want to say, on 3 different boards. And because we weren't talking to each other, that's not bringing a diverse perspective and life experience and all of these sorts of things. And so we're getting much better at organizing and coordinating and having a cohesive list and making sure that that doesn't happen. Because, you know, Councillor Shaw is not wrong. We have had problems in the past getting enough people to apply that I haven't found that that's actually been the issue in the last year or two at all. So it's really ensuring that we don't have that happening. Even if they're a great person, we also ask the question, where do you want to be? It looks like you're interested in multiple boards. What's your priority? To really give other community members who are wanting to get involved that opportunity at the table. So that just to give you some history of why this is specifically in the policy. Council President who?
Just following up on the comment about having definition of diverse voice, it just dawned on me that at least for Planning Commission, there is already a diverse voice because there are requirements that some member have to be in this profession, and some have to be this profession resident, and so there's already diverse voice involved, at least for planning commission. So maybe instead of having a broad policy on a definition on that, maybe we can just
Within the bylaws.
for each board we can just
Yeah.
specify for this board this this is the diverse voice we're talking about. So maybe it's easier that way, board specific rather than a broad definition of that for every board. So just something to think about.
Yeah.
Any other additional questions or comments or a motion on what's been presented?
I move to adopt the board and committee member eligibility policy.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Youth Counselor Nog, will you give us an advisory vote?
Yes.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 I was waiting for that or your hand. Any opposed, please? Seeing none, the motion is adopted by unanimous vote of the council. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Moving on, we have a tenant protections discussion, and that is with Senior Planner Warren. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Lube and councilors. My name is Skylar Warren, Senior Planner in the Department of Community Development. I'm joining you remotely this evening because I've been a little under the weather recently, so I hope you'll be patient if I do have to pause during this presentation to collect myself here a little bit. I'm here tonight to continue our discussion about tenant protections. I'm going to apologize here that for some of you, a portion of this will be a repeat of previous information, but we thought it was important that we provide the same background to new members of the council before we get into a discussion of what we've learned since our last briefing. And our ask of you this evening is for your feedback as we develop these tenant protection options for the council as per Council Strategy 1.5. Next slide. So I want to set the stage for the presentation with some quick facts. As many of you know, I could fill hours with a discussion of the multivariate policy, economic, and social factors at play in the current state of housing and houselessness. But I'm going to keep it simple and focus on three key pieces of housing context. First, I think all of you are all aware that our region and the state have been experiencing a prolonged and severe housing shortage. What you may not be aware of is the depth of this crisis. When Metro performs the regional housing needs analysis that's required by state law, their model only accounts for population growth in determining housing need. Unfortunately, the Great Recession had a major impact on housing production, and the region has underproduced housing for existing residents for over 15 years now. This underproduction has a compounding effect with the outcome that we are now short by over 50,000 units. This is without accounting for any population growth. As a result of this supply shortage, housing prices, including median rents, have skyrocketed over the years, consistently outpacing inflation and wage growth. Within Tigard, this is having a major impact on the stability of renting households. Fully 29% of our renting households are spending more than half of their income on rent. For reference, federal guidelines say that a household should spend no more than 30% of its income on housing costs. Next slide. And next slide again. So we are consistently hearing from the community about the impacts of housing instability for renters. As a state-designated rent-burdened community, we are required to hold an annual meeting to discuss the needs of our community that rents their housing. Go ahead to the next animation there. In each of these forums, we've heard loud and clear that Tigard's renters are concerned about their right to remain stably and safely housed. We've also had 3 mass displacements of renters within the past 7 years. starting with Walnut Tree Apartments in 2016. Of course, as you all know, the Woodspring Apartments situation seems headed toward a positive outcome, but not without 2 years of anxiety for the tenants and a Herculean effort to procure funding for a purchase. The most recent displacement at Crown Oaks Apartments affected a diverse community of families, some with limited English proficiency, and many of whom had children attending Metzger Elementary. That displacement happened in the midst of the school year. And lastly, I will highlight that we do have some policy guidance on housing equity from both adopted documents and from feedback received from the community in both formal and informal settings. And so as we look at any potential policy or program development, an important first step is to understand the stakeholders involved. We've talked a bit already about the first stakeholder group, and that would be tenants. It's important to acknowledge that we also need to engage with our housing developers, property owners and landlords, and property managers. Going back to one of the roots of the problem, undersupply, we want to be cognizant that any policies and programs don't have the unintended consequence of decreasing supply of rental housing in the long term. For the purposes of our policy discussion, next slide. There are two broad categories of tenant protections that we are proposing to further explore and develop. They each tackle different issues in the rental market where there is an inherent imbalance or inequity. The first is eviction protections. These are programs that are intended to protect tenants from the impacts of evictions, particularly no-cause evictions. And then the second category is habitability protections. These programs and policies are intended to ensure that the supply of rental housing in the city is safe and properly maintained. I'll start with eviction protections, but before I get into any of the proposals, I want to talk about why any city would have an interest in preventing evictions. Evictions have been shown to have a significant impact, not just on the tenants, but on the broader community. Multiple studies have demonstrated these impacts. Probably most critically, given the moment we are in, evictions are a direct contributor to the crisis of houselessness. Ensuring that tenants have an equitable chance to stay housed and have a safety net in finding new housing when they are given a no-cause eviction may be the single most consequential near-term action to support the city's work to prevent and end houselessness. Evictions are a public safety issue, as they have been demonstrated to lead to greater crime rates. Evictions are an equity issue, with households of color and single mothers disproportionately being evicted. Further, households with children are actually more likely to be evicted. They're a health and public welfare issue, with multiple studies demonstrating the adverse mental and physical health outcomes for parents and children who are evicted. And one study found that the spread of COVID and death rates increased in communities where eviction moratoria expired. Evictions also have the opposite impact of homeownership, where familial wealth generally increases. Instead, evictions lead to a cycle of poverty and further evictions. And finally, one study even found that evictions decrease turnout for elections, further disenfranchising the communities who are disproportionately impacted. Back one slide, sorry. So we set about researching best practices from other cities to reduce and mitigate the impacts of evictions. From among those, there were two that stood out. I want to highlight that these two programs target different categories of evictions. The first is intended to address issues of housing instability that result from no-cause evictions. These are evictions like those mass displacements that we discussed earlier, where the tenant is in good stead, meeting the terms of their lease and paying their rent as required. And in order to mitigate the impact of an eviction in this event, a landlord would need to provide relocation assistance to all impacted tenants. This is to help those tenants successfully find new housing, pay deposits, and move when all of these are unexpected expenses for which they may only have received 2 or 3 months' notice. An eviction is a major disruption to the life of tenants with financial risk and consequences, impacts to jobs, and the potential for life-changing adverse childhood experiences. The Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies has shown that renter households are at a significant financial disadvantage compared to owner households, with only about 10% of the typical level of savings of a homeowner household. And so relocation payments can help a family with little economic means to land on their feet. And lastly, it addresses an important issue of equity. While relocation assistance does not prevent no-cause evictions, it can reduce their frequency and their impact, helping to even the playing field. After all, there is no such thing as a no-cause foreclosure. Next slide. Sorry. The second category of evictions we are looking to prevent are those where a family is on the brink, is in arrears on their rent, and where an eviction would increase their risk of becoming unhoused. Legal aid for tenant, more frequently known as right to counsel, can help prevent an eviction in these situations by advocating for tenants during a hearing. In many cases, an advocate can help negotiate a stipulated agreement that connects the tenant with rent assistance resources and provide back rent to the landlord. This is a win-win for both parties, as it keeps the tenant housed and makes the landlord whole without any vacancy period. This program is intended to help address the lack of advocacy in legal proceedings for tenants, where that representation could help negotiate that win-win. Nationally, 90% of landlords have legal representation, while only 10% of tenants do. It can also help when there is a violation of state landlord-tenant law. Most of these laws have no enforcement mechanism at the state level other than legal proceedings. Most tenants, I think we can agree, are not going to have the knowledge, means, and sometimes English language skills to navigate the complex world of filing a legal claim, and so this presents a significant barrier. In the last 5 years, right to counsel programs have undoubtedly been one of the more effective interventions to help tenants across the country, leading to reductions in evictions ranging from around 75% to up to 95% in one case. I also want to highlight that this type of program does not duplicate efforts being made through the region-wide supportive housing services measure. In fact, a right to counsel program supplements those efforts by helping those families who have slipped through the system and are now at risk of becoming unhoused. So to end this section on eviction protections, I'll highlight that there is local and national precedence for these programs, and we have learned, and we can continue to learn and build on the knowledge gained from the implementation in those cities to craft a better and more targeted approach. The second major program area for consideration is habitability protections. As I mentioned before, these are programs and policies that are intended to ensure the city's supply of rental housing is safe and properly maintained. There's really only one program involved here, but it has two interrelated aspects. The first is a system of rental registrations, and the second is a program of proactive rental inspections. Fortunately, there are a number of precedents out there for this type of program, to the point where there are already well-developed codes and implementation methods. A rental registry functions somewhat like a business license, with a nominal annual fee that is typically based on the number of units. Proactive inspections are based on this registry, where a very small number of units are randomly selected annually for inspection. That inspection itself is based on a standardized international property maintenance code, for which there is significant support, much like the National Electrical Code or the International Building Code. However, these inspections are looking at health, safety, and welfare issues such as fire alarming, sanitation, lighting, adequate ventilation, etc., and not those building code issues that the building code covers. The goal of an inspection, of course, is not to punish or cite a property owner. Instead, it is to inform them of the violations and begin a process with the city to collaboratively bring the property into compliance. This kind of program has many benefits. First, most obviously, it protects human life. Secondly, it hopefully reduces the number of reactive complaints that are filed with the city. Third, it identifies issues where a tenant may not be aware enough to notify their landlord or file a complaint, or where they might fear reprisal for doing so. And then fourth, it actually benefits the landlord by identifying problems before they become larger, more costly, or potentially a legal liability. We know from a few local and national precedents that these are well-received and beneficial programs. And we do have a precedent here with Gresham and McMinnville, and somewhat with Multnomah County as well. Next slide. At the Council's direction, after our October discussion, we began conversations with stakeholders representing property managers, property owners, developers, and landlords. In the next few slides, I'm going to sum up what we heard in that preliminary discussion. And I want to highlight that we don't have programs fully developed yet, and these are what we heard about program concepts. We can certainly address some of these concerns during program development. Others, we might need to come to a consensus with all of the involved stakeholders. The first is relocation assistance. The feedback on this one was that, like any additional cost to doing business in renting property, the costs of relocation assistance can get passed on to the tenants. Another is that for some landlords, it may be a motivation to sell their property and get out of renting altogether. If not crafted well, these programs can be an administrative burden. There's also feedback that exemptions would be needed, and those exemptions should be administratively easy to use. On the topic of legal aid, there was a concern that the law is already heavily tilted in the favor of tenants. There were also questions about how the program would get information to tenants, notifying that they could avail themselves of the program. On rental registrations and inspections, again, the additional costs there could possibly get passed on to tenants. There was a report that the experience with the program in Gresham was a positive one. And one commenter wanted to ensure that rental inspections would not somehow hold up the development process by competing for resources with the building inspection program. And I'll close things out with some general take-home messages from that stakeholder group. First, that the city should avoid the what we call the all stick and no carrot approach to these programs. That we should also minimize paperwork and process to make the compliance process straightforward and simple. There is a stated need for landlord education and support. We would want to be careful with any additional screening and application requirements if they are implemented. It is worth noting that we're not currently considering any of those screening requirements, or additional screening requirements at this time. And there was a desire for a tiered system that made it easier for mom and pop landlords to comply, as well as larger institutional landlords. And so with that, I'll move on to the council discussion and ask what questions and concerns you all have as we move ahead with development of these programs to potentially come back to the council with implementing ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. We will open it up for questions or comments. I know that was a lot of information coming at us. So again, there are two general sections or groupings: the eviction protection policies, which are relocation assistance for tenants, and legal aid to support legal aid support to provide enforcement for the state and local law. And the second piece is habitability protection policies, which is rental registrations and rental inspections. So those are the 2 buckets and the 4 detailed pieces that we're talking about. I thought that summary might help us. So I wrote it down. Yes, Council President Hu.
Thank you, Scott, Mr. Warren. Yeah, so to full disclosure, I'm a landlord. I own rental properties. So I do appreciate the concern you share from other landlords. So one comment is that, yeah, I do think that inspection could benefit landlord as well, in that it identify hidden concerns or issues with the property. But I do have property managers who does annual inspections on my properties, and they do provide a very detailed report, like 20, 30 pages. So to address your concern, other people's concern that this kind of inspection might take resources away from, construction inspection, that's legitimate. So maybe if we do go down that route, we can think about, having a way for landlord to certify that they do conduct annual inspection and possibly provide the result to the city. So we don't have to waste our inspector or waste our resources or inspector's time to conduct an inspection of a property that's being inspected annually already. So, and I do have one question, possibly two, is you kept referring to non-cost evictions. So other than those example mass evictions, I have a hard time understanding what no-cost eviction mean, because as a landlord right now, I cannot evict my tenants without cost because of the state law that's passed a couple of years ago. So I cannot do no-cost eviction. So can you explain to me what you're talking about when you said non-cost eviction, other in cases not involving those mass eviction cases?
Yes, great question. I do want to step back a second, and I probably didn't clarify this very well. The concern was conveyed about taking resources away from our development inspection program, but as currently envisioned, any inspection program for rentals would be housed within our code compliance section, which is independent from the building section. So those are two sort of different buckets, and so we wouldn't be drawing from that pool of inspectors. With regard to the question about no-cause evictions, there are state rules around no-cause evictions. Right now, there are certain circumstances where a no-cause eviction is still allowed with certain extended notice requirements. I believe it's 90 days at the state level. That's where you're seeing the situation like the one at Crown Oaks. And so those are the types of situations that we want to avoid, or not avoid. We want to ensure that our tenants are able to land on their feet. For a no-cause eviction, what that essentially means is the tenant, they're paying their rent on time, they're not violating the terms of their lease, they haven't damaged the property. There's just circumstances where the landlord is evicting them for other purposes. And in those situations, that's an unexpected expense. And as I mentioned, for the household, it can be a very disruptive thing, especially if the children are in the middle of the school year or something like that. So the relocation assistance is intended to help that family land on their feet in that situation. The relocation assistance would not cover other certain situations. So if a tenant were evicted for cause, like not paying rent, damaging the property, violating the terms of their lease, if in cities that have implemented it, there are certain carve-outs for if it's your only rental property and you're moving back into it, or a family member is moving back into it, you don't have to pay relocation assistance. And there's certain other small carve-outs like that.
I still don't understand what you're talking about, because right now I cannot evict my tenants even for without cost. So we can discuss more that offline. Second point I want to ask is the legal assistance. How would you envision that will be paid for? Because I know that Multnomah County is considering a special measure to raise capital gains tax to pay for lawyers for tenants. And my understanding is that that measure is not even popular with, I guess, more progressive leaders in Portland, Multnomah County, and Metro. So anyway, how would we pay for legal counsel for tenants under this proposed regulation? Thank you.
Yes, that program would require budgetary outlay to fund it. There is currently no funding source that's been particularly earmarked for that. It is possible that the rental registration program would provide enough revenue to offset that, but I want to be clear that we haven't done any kind of fiscal analysis on that, on the potential revenue from a rental registration program. The right to counsel program functions sort of like having a legal counsel on a retainer. There could be periods of time where the program's not being used at all and no funds are being expended. And there could be a situation like Woodspring or Crown Oaks where a tenant is being evicted and would need to avail themselves of that program. So there's not a consistent outlay in terms of what we would expect, but of course we could always have a not to exceed amount on any contract that we had for those services.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up a little bit on your comments about being a landlord. Speaking is not my forte today, enunciating. And so I want to talk about a little bit, I'm going to make some assumptions that you perhaps are a best case scenario landlord where you have a robust property management company who provides you 30 pages. And I don't want to punish or overly complicate those situations where landlords are doing what they need to do and they're providing safe homes. But I want to say there's probably a lot of really bad actors in Tigard who are not doing those sorts of things for their tenants. And so I hope that we would find this sort of middle ground where maybe we could certify the report, but even somebody saying that that's what it is and having somebody physically step in the house and see something totally different. I want to make sure that we're, in the end, protecting the people who are living in Tigard with, basic rights to safe, clean, warm, dry housing. Not that I don't trust landlords, but quite frankly, I don't necessarily trust all of them, given my personal experience, given neighbors that I've seen. Neighbor in Tigard, talked to me about how many different times they literally had to harass the property management company in order to get something taken care of. So I want you to keep the perspective that you may be one of those landlords who are doing all of those things that creating that environment, but we have a whole host of landlords who are not. And those are the people that we are trying to protect, because I think housing is one of those fundamental things that if you don't have a safe, stable, dry, comfortable place to live, the rest of your life is hard to put together and hard to maintain consistency. So I hope as the city teammates would move forward with something like this. We certainly don't want to be overly prescriptive and penalize those landlords who are doing well, but we need to hold those landlords accountable who are not. So I wanted to give that feedback, that I appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I also want to recognize that we have limited inspectors. So I do want them to inspect as many as possible. So in the cases where the landlord seems to be doing their job, maybe we can move on to more questionable landlords. So that's what I meant. So.
Yeah, and I assume, you know, if we were to stand up something like this, it's not something that like we would do immediately. It would have to be some sort of phased approach over a year or multiple years, and, you know, definitely require administrative costs. But I would hope that, you know, that we would figure out a way that whatever we're charging would, you know, cover what we're doing as a program that can stand up and take care of itself. But I just, you know, I think about my situation growing up and other people in Tigard, and I just want to make sure that, you know, people have access to safe homes. Yeah. Councillor Shaw?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council President Hu, for both your comments. And Mayor, to your point about middle ground, last year, as you recall, when, and thank you to Senior Planner Warren for bringing this up both today, but also last year in 2022, and finding that middle ground. I think you'll remember I had asked if we had heard from a number of housing developers, property owners, and property managers, and I think the answer was it wasn't a robust comments or feedbacks from that group. And then you also kindly scheduled that January 5th meeting for 2023 this year. And as you recall, we had about 5 individuals show up, 2 who I think you would classify as mom and pop. They had owned their own single family homes, but had moved, unfortunately, out of the area to Sherwood. And I believe the other one was to Hillsborough. We hope they come back and buy another home, or maybe more, and provide those, again, that rental opportunity. But the other one was a landlord representative who actually didn't know if her client had any buildings within Tigard. And then there was a gentleman from the Housing Building Association, and he said, of course, they build single family homes, so it wasn't necessarily relevant to him short term, but to Mayor's point, it could be long term. So I'm still concerned about the overall us trying to find balance and trying to find a middle ground. I don't think 5 individuals representing the city is diverse. So I'm hopeful, and perhaps this is my question to you, is are we going to go back out? And I believe at that January 5th meeting you said you would be, but go back out and reach out to those housing developers, to the property owners and property managers to really find out what could we encourage them to, you know, come to the table with. And I know we had some recommendations, so thank you very much for providing those. But can we ensure that there's more robust outreach?
Yes, certainly. You know, as I mentioned, you know, as we move forward, we'll redouble our efforts to reach out to those larger institutional landlords. We actually did extend far more invites than we actually had participants. I think part of it might have just been the timing of a meeting on January 5th. And I think also, you know, it's a matter of finding the right person. And, you know, we've been continuing to do the work to network with folks and assemble a list of stakeholders who can help us to right size any program that we develop. So I appreciate the comment, and I can assure you that we will continue to do that kind of outreach that you're looking for.
Great, thank you, Senior Planner Warren. And perhaps another suggestion is, I know oftentimes we want the developers to come, and I agree January 5th may not have been the best date, but it was workable with all our calendars. But I'm wondering too, if we can't actually go to some of these folks too, instead of having them come to the city, maybe it makes sense for us to go see them in the places that they are located. So just offering that as a suggestion as well. It might be more doable to getting additional comments. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions or comments? Youth Councillor Knock?
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. For the legal aid, I was wondering, do we have like an organization in mind as to like who would provide it? Because I know that there are a couple of statewide legal aid councils, however, they are severely understaffed. So when it comes to the question of like legal aid, who are we thinking of?
So generally the organization that's doing the most work in Washington County right now is the Oregon Law Center, and we have been working pretty closely with them on a number of things. They were one of the presenters at our annual required tenants meeting back in the fall. Like all organizations where they do pro bono legal work, they are, as you say, extended beyond their resources. And part of a right to counsel program the goal of that is to actually help them expand their resources to make sure that they're able to help those in need. I also want to mention, since you are talking about statewide action, we are continuing to monitor what's going on in the current legislative session. There have been at least some discussions of bills that would include right to counsel type of measures, and so certainly if that's enacted at the state level, that would preclude our need to act locally. So we're keeping apprised of that, and we'll update our work accordingly.
Okay, so one more thing. Have we had any consider into capping rent inflation? I know that Senate Bill 611 and House Bill 2733 are working on capping the overall rent inflation of 3%, considering the housing market rose 17% from 2022. Or is there any consideration for maybe passing a local ballot measure for this as well? I know that St. Paul and Minneapolis have done similar things for localized ways to fight inflation.
That's a great question. Currently, under state law, local jurisdictions are precluded from enacting any kind of rent control, and that statute was amended to implement the statewide rent control cap that's tied to the Consumer Price Index. That's the one that in the most recent year allowed for up to a 14% increase in rent. There is a bill currently at the state that is under consideration. I think it's still in committee, that would lift the preclusion on local rent control or rent caps. We've had no conversations, though, to date about looking at that. I mean, it's certainly something that we could revisit with the council should that preemption at the state pass, but it's not really under consideration in this work program or anything that we're working on currently.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Singh?
Yeah, thank you, Senior Planner Warren. I just want to thank you for doing this presentation, and I really believe it's a discussion we should continue to have. I think we need to do everything we can to keep people stabilized in housing, and I believe as a council and a city we should really be prioritizing this in our budget as well. So just want to say thank you for this.
Thank you. Council Wolf?
Yeah, just to, I feel like I'll probably ditto a variety of things that have already been said. I am very curious, and I shared this with Senior Planner Warren, about the Gresham program. I think that's a tremendous opportunity to create something that's self-sustaining by generating the registration fees. And I do think there's a concern about those that look the other way when it comes to maintenance and repairs, and those that didn't know. And so there's a tremendous win to capture both of those, and certainly have personal experience as well of those continued frustrations of with family members that have had those challenges. So anyway, so I'm very interested in that piece. I am curious about the budget and the cost, and again, with Senior Planner Warner, I talked about right now there is a lot of legislation that's kind of bouncing around. So also to be mindful, but to kind of see how Salem shakes out is also what I'm thinking too, is what does those packages look like that we will navigate in, and then what makes sense for us to move forward in that capacity. And like Youth Councilor Nong pointed out, the demands are huge, so how would that need to be funded to generate an appropriate level of support? And maybe that's a continued conversation with Washington County as well, to learn more locally how that's working. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but those are my thoughts.
No, I think that's helpful. I feel like, Senior Planner Warren, you've gotten general support to move forward with these areas, and continue to check in with the community on just refining them. And please bring us along the way before you come back and present something for us to vote on. Does that sound right, everyone? Yep, getting lots of head nods. Okay. Any final thoughts from anyone? No? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good evening.
Our next item on the agenda is the National League of Cities Conference City Council debrief. I asked to put this on the agenda. We've never done this before, but we had the entire council go to the National League of Cities Conference, and because we are not legally allowed to really talk to each other about city business outside of a public meeting, I thought it was a wonderful opportunity. If there's a particular workshop that you went to that you found insightful, or if you had any feedback or ideas, this is your opportunity. So please share your experience, and also, let the community members know what you learned. Anyone like to start? Youth Councilor Nog.
Okay.
You've been nominated.
Great. Sure. So there are like 2 action items that I guess I want to take. So one of the things, and it came in like very timely, because I think Oregon's approved over-the-counter buying of Narcan, and I think this is a thing that I probably need to talk to the district about, but I think it's important that all districts have Narcan available to them, like first aid kits and everything, because I think that's really important, especially in high schools and middle schools nowadays. Another thing is hall safety, especially for students, and I think walkability, that's one of our priorities. One of my friends, Blue Falcon Ninja, I'll give her a shout out. She worked very hard to get a crosswalk in a pretty important part of like a school crossing zone, and I think it's really important for like students to consider like walkability and safety, especially like near the elementary schools, because oftentimes, like, I know some of my friends that are driving down Durham, very scary. So it's okay. Another thing that I think TIAC is working on approving as a whole is adopting kind of like a capstone project where we choose like a local, I'm forgetting the name, like a local nonprofit to kind of work for and fundraise throughout the course of the year. Instead of choosing multiple, we'll just continuously like financially support one of them for 1 year, and then we can choose another one. So those are kind of like my 3 big takeaways.
Great kickoff. Thanks. Great opportunity to learn across the state, and I feel like I shouldn't steal Mayor Lube or Councilor Shaw's thunder for the great work that you all did. But the peer review really hit home with me on conversations of best uses for the ARPA funds that we all received. And some communities or cities seemed very targeted and isolated on one-shot investments, and the work that was done for the entrepreneurial businesses around the loans. I just felt like, and certainly helping those that are unhoused, is just shout out to the city for the great work that was put into place and how to best leverage those dollars. So that was just a yay point of pride that I didn't really get to take, but just wanted to appreciate that. And I was surprised, and I talked to City Manager Reimer about this, just the constant request that cities make sure that they're using their ARPA funds that seemed to be a challenge and concern in just the workings of cities and whether, they have the supports to get that done, but I was just surprised at that. One of the sessions that I attended, and Council President Hu and I attended together, was on police hiring strategies, because that's a national challenge, and just some of those think differently on how you approach your hiring and think out of the box in that regard. And I thought that was interesting, and then there was lists there. And then I think the last thing that I really appreciated is, again, the message across the board on behalf of President Biden that local leadership matters, and this is where the work gets done. And I felt like that was consistent throughout. And I'll stop there, and I'll pass it on. But
Well, it's my turn. So, well, first of all, it was really nice to spend time with Mayor Loop and all the councilors outside of a city council setting. It's great, it's great to experience for team buildings. We have a chance to know each other in our, well, not in our natural habitat, because DC is not a natural habitat, but just outside of the city council function. So that was a great experience. Just the big general takeaway is I really appreciate, listening to all the elected local leaders talking about the importance of elected local leaders showing up at where people are. That's, just being consistent about showing up at where people are. That's the only way to build trust with the people of our city. And we really need their trust if we're going to really ask them to invest in our community. So that really resonated with me. And I think touching on ARPA funding, one creative way I learned from ARPA, one city uses the ARPA funding to buy or rent homes for their city employees, because their city housing crisis was reaching critical level where the city employees cannot afford to live in their city. So one creative way of using ARPA is to provide housing assistance to their city employees. And that's because another theme is that city employees are one, if not the most valuable resources the city could have. So we need to be nice to our city employees. Sometimes I ask tough questions, but I do like them a lot. So, and let's see. And one thing is about the workforce investment. That's really important. We want people in our city to have nice jobs, and I think we're trying to do the best we can with Tiger Made and stuff like that. And it's important to expose our youth to different occupation and workforce options. 4-year college is important, but that's not the only way to earn a good living. So, when I was on a tour, I was really encouraged to hear from our public work departments that we're bringing youth to our public works to show them, some of the trades that, cool tools that our public work employee have, so hopefully that will inspire them to, pursue a career in engineering or maintenance or whatever. So that's the big lesson I took away from the conference. So thank you.
No, that's wonderful. I really enjoyed spending time with all of you, and I was invigorated by our 3 youth delegates. Just seeing the excitement of being in DC. DC is probably one of my favorite cities in the world, and we were there for peak cherry blossom, so we got some excellent group pictures. Just spending time together and going on walks and having some really important conversations one-on-one about Tigard, or just being inspired. I think you all made me proud to be with you. You conducted yourselves well. You took it incredibly seriously. You showed up, and you were very excited too. So I just want to make sure to let all of you know how proud I was to be able to say, this is the Tigard City Council, and we are all here showing up for each other and for our community. Like Councilor Wolf, during the ARPA conversations, it was really interesting because most cities at my table really did like a one and done, this is where we spent all of our money. And it got to me and I started I sort of cheated and also brought up our webpage of everything that we're doing and talking about it. And they literally started writing notes and talking to them about how important it was for us to do a couple of programs that would continue to go on and would be self-sustaining. That really blew their minds. And talking about our food cart pods, they said this is what we spent the least amount of money on, but it's one of the coolest things that we're doing, and just really showing other communities around the nation what Tigard is doing. And I think that we get so busy doing all of the things that we forget to really stop and look that we are a leader in this state and this country for the size of city that we are and what we're doing. And I don't think we stop and thank our teammates enough for working alongside us, and previous councils for being visionary enough to help us set us on this path, and current counselors for pushing us in different areas. So I want to share, I get excited and reinvigorated by just how wonderful Tigard is and all of the things that we're doing. So I wanted to share that piece of it. Councillor Singh.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I think, DC's a lovely city, one of my favorite cities, just being able to walk everywhere. One of the highlights for the trip was attending a session on federal clean energy funding for your city. I found out about a national program run by the Department of Energy that launched in 2016 to reduce barriers to clean energy options. It's called Soul Smart. So it helps cities encourage solar market growth at the local level. It offers no-cost technical assistance to help local governments follow national best practices to expand solar energy use. As of 2023, SoulSmart has designated nearly 500 local governments and regional organizations, and they're trying to expand that program to 1,000 communities by 2027. And just overall, over the next 10 years, lots of investments are going into clean energy, around $500 billion at the federal level through different laws that recently passed through Congress. So just super excited that these opportunities are coming down the pipe, and just had a great time with the rest of the council too. So
thank you.
Councilor Shaw.
Councilor Shaw.
Thank you. And hard to round out the kind of comments, because I felt very similar to what you've all said. Very thankful to attend. Just honored to represent the city of Tigard along with the mayor, the council president, my fellow councilors, and also a big shout out to staff. I think without their hard work, whether it's on the website or all the materials they provide, the talking points, just really to help us show up well. And I think what we found amongst our fellow cities across the United States is that safety, public safety, houselessness, as we call it on the West Coast, on the East Coast they call it homelessness, the lack of housing, the increase in mobility options, whether it's transportation electrification of scooters or e-bikes, was really exciting. I think it was also great that we had the opportunity as a council and as a region to meet with our Oregon congressional delegation. They were very interested to hear both from our youth counselors, but also from us as city councilors, on what our cities are doing and how we can engage them and how they can assist us with federal funding. As Councilor Singh pointed out, there's opportunities there that really they can help assist us in availing the city of. And then also, I think too, to the point of when we met with our congressional delegation, we got to meet our fellow city councilors from Gresham, from the city of Tualatin. I got to actually go to lunch with Mayor Bubanek, and we paid for it on our own, but it was actually a great opportunity to share what best practices our cities were doing. And so I think that was really helpful, and excited too that we got our youth counselors there, have a younger perspective. I now know how to do better selfies, so very excited about that. But with that, I'm just thankful again to the community for enabling us to attend NLC, and look forward to the learnings that we had and how we can implement them moving forward. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. It just gave me warm fuzzies all over again. We have no non-agenda items tonight, and so we will move on to an administrative report. We are right on time. This is so impressive.
Boom. Good evening, Mayor, councilors, members of the community, and my teammates. I also want to say thanks to all of you and our youth for attending, as well as Alex for joining all of you and being part of that and providing some guidance to our youth, but also give them a chance to be their own people in DC. So thank you to her as well. Just a few updates. Continuing the thanks, I want to thank our police department for our Shred Day. Heard from the team in chief that we had 305 cars in 3 hours come through, which is great. And as part of that, they also donated 1,800 pounds of food to the St. Vincent de Paul. So kudos to all of them, to our volunteers, especially from Rotary, to Maddie and Michelle from the team for just their leadership and guidance working with the community on this important event. So thanks to all of them. We've talked about a few different projects today, and we've mentioned Hall Boulevard visioning process a few times in updates like this, as well as the weekly updates to all of you. We have our visioning session this week on Thursday from 6 to 8 here. It's just a chance to bring the community in, get their feedback, and they'll just help guide all of our work on Hall Boulevard, which is extensive, as you know, from a funding standpoint, safety standpoint, design standpoint, our vision standpoint. So just another important event coming up. Same thing, we talked about Red Rock Creek. We'll have a alignment study this Thursday from noon to 1:30. We're inviting in ODOT, for example, members of the community, residents, businesses to come in and also talk about that important project that you learned more about today as well. It's amazing that we're continuing to work with Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon, MISO. That's not the amazing part. The amazing part is that we're coming up on the time to look at our next entrepreneur for Opportunity Cafe at the library. So Israel Martinez has been very successful, as you know. The library's always busy. He's busy, provides great service. So he'll be working in that space at least through the end of summer, early fall. But we'll also start that process of how do we actively recruit the next business. And so hopefully Israel's going to move on to another location and continue his business and give that chance for someone else to come in, get some of the tools, low rent, financial assistance and other things from MISO and others to once again help with that really equity-centered economic development that we're proud of as well, just like many other things you heard at NLC. So that'll continue, and we'll keep you in the loop as we work through that process. And a couple other things. We also have our second installment of the Family Caregiver Series at our library. The Washington County Family Caregiver Support Program will come in this Wednesday, April 5th at 3 o'clock. We also have the return, we've had the return of our bilingual story time, and this has really been embraced by our community. Sounds like recently we had 32 kids and grown-ups attend, so we know there's a need and demand, and so we're going to continue some of those great programs. And last but not least, in the library as well, our local history room is open to the public after 2 p.m. on every day, and that charts back from Tigers development from 1850 through the present with a variety of things. So just a good way for those wanting to learn more about their community or community that they may be interested to, once again, another thing that's at our library. And that concludes my remarks this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The Tigard City Council is entering into an executive session to discuss the performance review of a public official, ORS 192.660-2I. All discussions are confidential, and those present may disclose nothing from the session. No executive session may be held for the purpose of taking any final action or making any final decision. The City Council will adjourn after the executive session. Thank you so much. Good night, Tigard.